The last components in this phase is for anyone new to Django DRF. In this tutorial, we'll create our first API endpoint with DRF. This will give you a basic overview of how we're going to interact with Django REST framework as we start to integrate the Redis components. Right, so we have already installed Django REST framework. That was initiated in our Docker file and installed to our image, and then of course that is now available in our container. So let's build our first endpoint with Django REST framework. We're going to build an endpoint which will simply allow us to inspect all the products in the product table. Let's start by going to core and settings, and let's move up to the installed apps, and let's now register the REST framework. Right, so now we need to make a serializer. So in the inventory folder here, let's create a new file. Let's call this serializers.py. The basic functionality of a serializer in DRF is to perform two roles: to convert Django model instances data into JSON so that we can send it to the client, and to parse incoming JSON back into Python objects or Django models to then go ahead and maybe insert into the database. So although we have much information to send back to the client, I'm going to restrict that in the serializer to just include the ID, name, and price. So that's what's going to be returned back to the client. We are using the product model, so I have now imported the product model into our serializer. Right, so we've created a serializer for the product model. We specified the model, and then we tell DRF to include only these fields in the API output. So if we had one product in the database and we were to return it with our API endpoint, we would see something like this. So now we can switch to the view so that we can handle requests from the client. So first of all, we import API view from the REST framework. So this is a class-based view that we're building. It lets us handle HTTP methods like get, post in a clean and organized way. So we're also going to need response. So this is what we use to actually send our data back to the client. And we have also brought in the product model and our serializer. Okay, so we create a new class called product list API view. So this class inherits from API view. That means it's built to handle web requests and responses in an API context. We now define our get method. This tells Django what to do when a get request comes into this endpoint. So we query the database with the product objects or to fetch every product. Then we pass that list into our serializer, specifying many true because we're passing multiple objects. Our serializer will convert all of our product objects into Python data structures that can then be easily turned into JSON. And then finally, we go ahead and wrap it in a response object, which formats the data as JSON and sends it back to the client. So now we simply need to set up a path so that we can access that endpoint or request it. So let's create a new file here called urls.py inside of our inventory app. And let's go ahead and add a new endpoint for this. So we're going to be able to send GET requests to the products endpoint, and that would then be handled by our product list API view. And now we just need to hook up these new URLs to the core URLs so that it will be accessible and for Django to use. So we now need to simply include a new path to the inventory URLs. So they will essentially be placed here in this main URL patterns, which will be picked up by Django and used to direct traffic. So here we have set up a prefix of API/. So in actual fact, to now get to our endpoint, it's going to be API/, and then whatever we've specified in the inventory URLs. So it's going to be API/product/. So that's going to be the route to access this new endpoint. So we create a new path, we specify a prefix, and then include the URLs we've just created so that Django can then identify those URLs and serve the URL to our endpoint. So what we've done here is we created a prefix of API slash. So the client will need to send the request to API slash and then product slash in order to be then for that request to be processed by the product list API view. Right, so let's finish this off by adding include. And now we should be able to see this in action. So we know what the path is. It's the localhost /API/products. So in our browser, I've done exactly that. And that takes us over to our REST framework interface where we can actually now view the outcome of that request. So essentially what we've done here is we've made that request and we're looking at the outcome. And of course, we have a range of different data in the products table. And we've now returned all of that product data. So this just simulates a request, a GET request to our endpoint. So that's pretty much everything we need to know to create a DRF endpoint. In this tutorial, we made sure the REST framework was installed. We've created a DRF serializer to convert our model instances into JSON so that it can be then sent back to the client. We've implemented a basic DRF view, a class-based view to handle the HTTP requests from clients, and we've registered an API endpoint using Django's URLs.